Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today we are here to talk about a show that I think has earned its place alongside shows like Lost, The Wire, The Leftovers, Game of Thrones, Buffy, and Breaking Bad as having one of the best second seasons of TV ever made. That's right, today we are talking about Severance Season 2. Let's just get it out of the way up front. It is damn near impossible to talk about this show without spoiling it, so this is your official one and only spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Severance Season 1 or 2 yet, what are you even doing with your life? I mean, seriously, what are you watching instead? Because I guarantee it's not better than Severance. Look, I know the nearly 3-year gap between seasons 1 and 2 was too long and annoyed the shit out of everyone. But that is largely not the fault of the show or its showrunners, and instead had a lot to do with greedy studio heads pushing the entertainment industry towards a massive strike that could and should have absolutely been avoided. That being said, Season 2 of Severance was absolutely worth the wait, though I do kind of think they front-loaded the season just a little bit. I truly think they pulled off one of the best second seasons of TV ever. It does everything a good second season of a show should do. All of our characters and all their stories simultaneously had their stakes raised while also deepening everything we thought we knew about the characters and this world in general. And really the entire scope of the show has now ballooned to the point that I'm honestly not sure where they take the show for Season 3, but I have some theories that we'll get into a bit later in the video. But before we get into things like theories, I think let's just start off with the basic premise of Season 2 of Severance, and then I'll break down some of my favorite performances and moments before going into theories towards the end of the video. Severance Season 2 picks up in the immediate aftermath of Season 1. We don't know how much time has passed initially, but we see Innie and Mark wake up in the elevator at Lumen, and we get this wonder of Mark running through the halls of Lumen looking for Miss Casey, who he just learned is his Outie's wife, who's been dead about 2 years in the outside world. Okay, this is really my one big complaint with Severance Season 2. I hated this opening running sequence. Don't get me wrong, there are some cool moments here, but I think by and large it was a giant waste of their time and resources. And the reason I say this is because this isn't one take, and it's using tons of CGI and treadmill work to fill in the gaps and trick your brain. The biggest reason for this is that the equipment they used to shoot this scene is called a bolt arm, which is a giant pre-programmed mechanical arm that the camera is attached to. So that had to be painted out of multiple shots, and then there are a couple of really obvious moments where Adam Scott is clearly running on a treadmill, and they've just rotoscoped him out and put him in front of these ugly looking plates. Now don't get me wrong, Adam Scott did this run, and neither I or anyone else on this planet can take that away from him. He spent hours of his life sprinting to get this shot done, but again, I just don't think this was really worthy of their time and resources, and for me, it started off Season 2 with a really sour taste in my mouth. And I know that a lot of the famous oneers in history have cuts hidden in them, but I just felt like Severance did a bad job hiding that this was multiple takes stitched together. What is interesting about this sequence is that after Season 2 wrapped, I discussed it with two different friends. One who's a cinematographer and another who's a screenwriter. The cinematographer loved this sequence, but the screenwriter and I hated it, so take that for what you will. Now where was I? Oh, right, the overall plot of Season 2. My bad, that opening shot has been bugging me for months, and apparently I needed to get it all out.
Apparently that's a trigger for me.
Yeah. Okay, so Mark does his big run through the hallway. Mr. Milchick lies and tells Mark it's been 5 months since the Season 1 finale, and that he has new team members. Mark throws a big fit and gets his original team back. Well, kinda, but more on that later. So our team of macro data refiners are all back together and can finally compare notes on their experiences in the real world. I like how pretty quickly Irving notices something off with Helly here and no one else does. And the group pretty quickly decide that it's their duty as Innies to rescue Gemma, which I'd say is our main driving story for a majority of this season. Well, that and Mark's attempt at reintegration, but again, we'll get deeper into all of that a bit later. Sticking with the main story of the season, episode 4 was probably my favorite episode of the season. Not only because it was nice to get outside of the office and see some nature, but because we get two of the biggest moments in Season 2. And that's when Mark and Helly hook up in a tent, and Irving discovers that Helly is being impersonated by Helena Egan, and hasn't been her Innie since the end of Season 1. And honestly, episode 4 almost ends as a soft reboot for the season, because once we're back in the office in episode 5, Mark and Dylan have to clue Helly in on everything she's missed, but also, they don't necessarily trust Helly anymore either. They now know that she's an Egan and that she can come to the Severance floor as Helena whenever she wants, and they have no reason to trust her or Lumen for that matter. However, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that this is definitely Helly and not Helena, and slowly Mark and Dylan begin to trust her. Mark and Helly even go hook up in an office because she feels like Helena stole that memory from her and she wants to experience it for herself. And episode 5 is also where Dylan discovers Irving's map to the exports hall, where it's believed that Mark's wife is being kept. And the entire season really culminates with Outtie Mark convincing Innie Mark to help him rescue Gemma from Lumen, which he does. And that's really all I want to say about the story of Season 2, because what I really want to get into with Severance Season 2 is the characters and performances that made this season as strong as it was. Let's start with the always magnificent John Turturro as Irving B and Irving Bailiff. Okay, but seriously, Turturro is fucking fantastic throughout this season. I really love that Irving was the only character to catch on to the inconsistencies of Helly's story about her experience during the overtime contingency. I mean, seriously, a fucking night gardener. It just shows that rich people are seriously some of the dumbest motherfuckers on this planet. But I digress. Really, for me, Turturro shines the most in 2 episodes. Episode 4, Woe's Hollow, and episode 6, Attila, where Irving has dinner with Bert, played by Christopher Walken, and his husband Fields, played by Denethor, Steward of Gondor. Fine, played by John Noble. Anyway, this dinner scene between the 3 of them is so fucking funny and weird and above all tense. Oh, it's so tense, and it only gets more tense as the sequence stretches on. So the basic backstory here is that in Season 1, Irving and Bert's innies fell in love with one another, which Bert was essentially fired for. And when Irving experienced the overtime contingency at the end of Season 1, his first stop was Bert's house, where he happened to be having a retirement party. Since that event, Bert's been kinda sorta following Irving around and finally caves and invites him over to dinner with his husband Fields. Now, the dinner itself starts off fairly sweet, if a little awkward. It's clear that Fields and Bert are in love and have been for decades. These two really nail that old married couple energy. But it's also clear that Fields is pretty sure Bert and Irving's innies were having an affair, and from here we get a long, deeply philosophical monologue about the nature of innies and what they do and don't deserve to get out of life. I really don't want to spoil this sequence entirely because it's some of the best acting throughout the entire show, but also because if I keep talking about it, we'll be here all fucking day. So let me just finish out talking about John Turturro's performance by saying this. He was the smartest of the innies, and he proved that by outing Helena as her outie, and that's why he had to go. Now, we do end the season with Irving and his dog on a train, and we don't know where they're going, but I can't wait to see more of his story in Season 3, because I want to know who the fuck he was talking to on that goddamn payphone. Okay, moving on to Zach Cherry as Dylan George, or my fucking boy, Dylan G. I feel like this character really won everyone over in the first season by being fully oblivious to the outside world, and how obsessed he was with the little trinkets he could win at Lumen. He's a silly character. While Dylan is definitely still providing some much needed comic relief in Season 2, they've also completely expanded and deepened his character. In Season 1, we learned that Dylan G's outie was married with kids, and well, this season really explores what that would be like for an innie. He's pretty jealous of outie Dylan, both for his wife and his kids, but one of the most interesting storylines of the season is the idea that Lumen would allow an outie spouse to come and visit with their innie. So that means Dylan G, as an innie, gets to meet with his outie's wife, and I just thought this was such an interesting setup. Because pretty quickly, Innie Dylan is super into his wife, and she sees something in Innie Dylan that she hasn't seen in her husband for years: hope, optimism, and drive. Now, these two do end up making out at one point, and I just thought that was, again, such an interesting premise. What would your reaction be to finding out that your spouse cheated on you with you? The promise of being able to see his outie's wife again is also what keeps Dylan from being a primary player in the overall story of trying to rescue Gemma. He doesn't want to get in trouble and have this privilege taken away from him. Yet, in the finale, he realizes that no matter what, that life can never be his. It's simply not possible for him, which leads to Dylan's best line of the series so far and one of Zach Cherry's best on-screen line deliveries.
Fuck you, Mr. Milchick.
Alright, before we talk about our other 2 macro data refiners, let's take a quick break to talk about our other 3 leads of the story. We'll start with Patricia Arquette. Look, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have a ton to say about her performance in this season, but only because her character is so even-tempered throughout the entire show. Even in her few moments of weakness, which are wonderful, I still feel the coldness of Harmony Cobell lurking underneath. Like, she may experience moments of vulnerability, but they're fleeting, and our cold and even-tempered Harmony is always just right below the surface. It's also pretty obvious obvious that she must be the most expensive actor on the show because she just disappears for several episodes. For those of you that don't know, one of the ways actors get paid is by the number of episodes they're in. So even if they only have one line, they'll still get their full fee for appearing in that episode. So with that in mind, that seems like the most likely reason why we got a more concentrated dose of Patricia Arquette this season. Now, Deachin Lockman isn't a newcomer to Severance by any means. She's obviously featured throughout season 1 as Miss Casey, but it wasn't until the end of season 1 that we learned that Miss Casey and Mark's departed wife Gemma are the same person. So season 2 is when Deachin Lockman really gets her chance to act, and holy shit does she get all the chances to act on this show. I really want to highlight her performance in episode 7, which is told primarily through flashbacks, giving us a full look into how Gemma and Mark met and fell in love, how their happy marriage began to fall apart because they lost a pregnancy, how they went to a Lumen fertility clinic to help, and how Lumen has kidnapped and is experimenting on Gemma while holding her prisoner. And I just have to say that going into season 2 of Severance, the idea of Miss Casey being Mark's wife wasn't particularly interesting to me. I didn't feel like these two had any chemistry in season 1, though obviously that was by design, and I just wasn't sure about bringing a secondary love interest into the story after we watched Mark S. and Helly R. spend all of season 1 basically falling in love. But it's precisely because of that the full intro of Deachin Lockman as Gemma works in season 2 of Severance, especially after episode 7, once we've had the chance to see her and Mark interact together as a loving couple. Also, okay, real quick side tangent. Has anyone else noticed that Apple TV Plus has a real dead spouse problem? It feels like 80% of their shows rely on the death of a spouse as a plot point. We've got Severance, Before, Shrinking, Silo, and Sunny. All have to do with the protagonists of the show trying to come to terms with the death of their spouse. It's just really fucking weird. Anyway, Deachin Lockman just fully shines throughout all of episode 7, and I loved the way we got to follow her go from Gemma to Innie to new personality, back to Gemma, and shout out to Jessica Lee Gagne who directed this episode. Apparently Jessica is the show's primary cinematographer, so it's cool that they had her direct such a visually striking episode. And finally, our last non-MDR character, Mr. Motherfucking Milchick, played by Trammell Tillman, who stole the entire show in season 1, and goddamn if he didn't do it again in season 2. And look, Tillman continues to command every single scene he's in, aside from his few scenes with Mr. Drummond, whom he seems genuinely terrified of, but even still, he puts on his brave face and does his best in all of those interactions. And don't get me started on his scenes with Miss Wong. The power dynamic between these two is not only tense, but fucking hilarious. Like, I'm sorry, but his biggest rival, being a 14-year-old on a fellowship, is almost as funny as Jack Donaghy beefing with Kaylee Hooper in 30 Rock. I said it's almost as funny. But seriously, I just want to call out a couple of my favorite Milchick moments from the season. Milchick staring at his computer, waiting for the message to change from Cobell's name to his. Milchick telling the story of Dieter Egan while Miss Wong plays the theremin, and then the way his demeanor completely changes when Helly laughs at the story. I love this moment in his review where he says that he hopes lunch won't be necessary, and Mr. Drummond just slides over the lunch menu, and you see him just die on the inside. I love the scene where he's aggressively trying to use smaller words, and the way he runs away from Dylan G in the finale is top tier physical comedy, and then I mean, of course, there's the entire sequence with the marching band, which is fucking incredible. Okay, look, I just really love Trammell Tillman in this role, okay? Alright, let's talk about Mark next, because goddamn, Adam Scott continues to just nail these characters. Both Innie and Outtie Mark feel completely distinct from one another. In the finale of season 2, we get this really wonderful conversation between Outtie Mark and Innie Mark done using a camcorder, and I really love how this conversation started slow. We saw the entire process. Watch the video, turn the camera over, film your response, walk through the door. And as the conversation continues, that process keeps getting cut down until we're at a point where we're just watching the two Marks converse in real time via the camcorder. And I love that they fully get into an argument here, because Innie Mark has absolutely no reason to trust Outtie Mark. Now let's take it back to the beginning of the season. I do think that Mark S is great in the season premiere. We talked about my many problems with the opening sequence, but aside from that, I still think Adam Scott's doing a fantastic job. Like, I love how he storms into Milchick's office and grabs the speaker box to try and talk to the board. His whole freak out here is just top notch. And then Adam Scott continues to have amazing chemistry with pretty much everyone he shares a scene with, and I think the brother-sister chemistry he has with Jen Tulloch is on another level. These two sell being a brother and sister better than some sibling siblings I've met. And I love their banter throughout the season and their stupid plan to burn a message into Mark's retinas before he goes into work. And speaking of that, let's talk about Mark's reintegration this season a bit. So early on in the season, Mark agrees to undergo a reintegration surgery at home performed by ex-Lumen employee Dr. Ragabi. And this gives us some of the more visually interesting moments of the season outside of episode 7 obviously, but I really liked all of the surreal moments as Mark begins experiencing reintegration, and again Adam Scott just does a great job of selling all of these moments. And how can we talk about Mark and Adam Scott without talking about Britt Lauer as Helly R and Helena Egan? Because goddamn, these two have great chemistry, almost on par as his chemistry with Amy Poehler. But that's a different video entirely. But seriously, I loved watching their relationship deepen and then become even more confusing. And in a show filled with acting MVPs, Britt Lauer almost manages to out MVP them all. Her balance between Helena and Helly this season was fascinating to watch, and pretty much every scene she was in on the severed floor had me questioning if I was really seeing Helly or if it was Helena impersonating Helly. Now, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I pretty much figured out it wasn't actually Helly right away. I had my suspicions in episode 1, but then they all but confirmed it in episode 2 when the elevator doesn't ding for Helly as she goes to the severed floor. And I mentioned this earlier, but her bullshit story she gives to the team about her overtime experience is so goddamn bad. Like, how did she not think of a better story before deciding to impersonate Helly? But I love the way she so confidently panics, and only Irving notices this because Helly R is almost never nervous and she's certainly not flappable. And above all else, her story is total bullshit. And of course, episode 4 is where Britt Lauer really gets to shine. I love the way she's just flirting with Mark nonstop throughout the Orkbo, and I love how she laughs at Milchick's story, and you can kind of tell she's wanted to laugh at this story for her entire life, but it's only in this moment where she can do it with little to no consequences. And I love the way she's lost in whimsy the following morning after hooking up with Mark when Irving straight up drowns her into confessing that she is in fact Helena Egan and not Helly R. And this line and exchange will live in my head forever when it comes to this show.
God damn it, Seth, do it!
Yes! Do it, Seth!
And this brings me to my first big theory for what season 3 of Severance could possibly be. I'm not fully convinced that this Helly we see in the finale is the real Helly. I don't have any proof, but something about her newfound decision to try and live after accepting that the Innies were done for does seem like a decision that Helena, not Helly, would make. And I'm just very curious to see how season 3 of the show will shake out, because I think Mark leaving Gemma behind to run away with Helly is such an interesting decision. But really, this is Mark choosing his reality. He chooses Helly because that's who he's in love with. That's how he feels. And side note, I love how fucking pissed off Innie Mark gets when Outtie Mark refers to Helly as Heleny. It's fucking fantastic. But anyway, Mark chooses the reality where he gets to exist and choose his own destiny. He has no reason to believe Outtie Mark will stay true to his word, or if he even can stay true to his word. And even if he does go with Gemma, he'll probably never get to see Helly again anyway. Which leads to the question, can Gemma even get away with where she is now? She's in the stairwell and she only kinda sorta understands what's going on, but she's never been to this building before and everyone is looking for her or trying to stop her from leaving. So is it even possible for her to make it out? And I'll be very curious to see the repercussions that everyone will have to face to see if Innies will even still be a thing anymore. If I had to guess, I'd imagine we're in for a Westworld Dollhouse-esque third season of Severance, where we watch the new emotionless Innies have to find their spark and become people again. Just for the love of God, please don't give me the same weird post-apocalyptic bullshit that both of those shows somehow devolved into. And look, you guys, I could keep going on and on about the show and how much I loved this season. Like, I didn't even mention Gwendolyn Christie and the goats, the Kier and blackface art that Mr. Milchick receives. We only kind of talked about Mr. Drummond, but if I keep going, this video will be insanely long. However, if you guys want a super long video where I go over season 2 of Severance episode by episode, let me know in the comments and I will make one ASAP. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. I've been Brandon from Born to Rant. We release new videos covering all things nerd culture every Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. With that out of the way, we'll see you next time. Okay, bye bye.